Hey lore lovers, my name's Eric with the Lorebrains YouTube channel, and welcome back to another installment of our Plane Explained series. This time we'll be taking a look at a plane that has been visited on more than one occasion, and the centerpiece of the most recent set, the breathtaking and dangerous plane of Zendikar. Zendikar is a world of abundant mana and untold treasures, where waterfalls cascade over Earth that has been suspended in air, and where dense jungles give way to rocky coastline or mountain plateaus. Where ancient stone hedrons dot the landscape, and where buried ruins lay trapped, begging to be explored by hardy adventurers. Where danger lurks around every corner, and where one misstep could spell certain doom. Zendikar is a truly magnificent plane, and we're going to uncover all it has to offer. As with all of the videos in my Plane Explained series, our journey through Zendikar will be split into two separate videos. The first, which will begin momentarily, is concerned with the characteristics of the plane, its nature, topography, denizens, and important locations. The second, which will be released next week, will cover the complete history and major storylines that transpire on the plane. But before we go any further, if notions of lore, storytelling, and world building leave you spellbound, or if Magic the Gathering is dear to your heart, consider subscribing to the channel, where videos on such topics are released each week. Alright, time to grab supplies and fill our packs as we prepare to explore the powerfully dangerous plane of Zendikar. Let's dive in. Zendikar is an untamed world filled with rich reserves of primordial and erratic mana. Its very nature is that of spontaneity and restlessness, reflected in the dangerous plants and animals that live within, the lack of significant technological advancement or dense populations among its civilizations, and the presence of a wild force of nature unique to Zendikar called the Royal. The Royal is a loosely defined term that encompasses the terrible storms, tectonic upheaval, noxious surges of mana, and general tumult and devastation that sweeps across the plane. The Royal is at the heart of Zendikar's being. One cannot be mentioned without the other, and its wild destruction that surges across all continents is what keeps Zendikar largely uncultivated and uncivilized. Like the Royal, the presence of hedrons throughout the plane is unique to Zendikar. A massive network of mystically constructed and magically powered stone artifacts, the hedrons play a significant role in the history of Zendikar, and one cannot venture far without seeing either a hedron or their impact on culture and society on the plane. One last concept that is integral to Zendikar's being is the Eldrazi, a mysterious and otherworldly race of plane-consuming beings. The Eldrazi have been present on Zendikar through much of the plane's history, and have had much to do in shaping Zendikar into what it is today. These three things, the Royal, the hedrons, and the Eldrazi, can be seen or felt across all of Zendikar, but there are many more locations, creatures, and treasures unique to the different continents of the plane. Zendikar has 7 such continents, separated by several bodies of water, each with its own climate, topography, and denizens, and each with its own secrets to be uncovered. We'll begin our journey on the volcanic continent of Akoum. Bubbling streams of magma sizzle and hiss as they roll into the coastal waters surrounding Akoum. This meeting of fire and water creates an exquisite cliffside of glass that is beautiful when seen from afar, but mortally dangerous to traverse. From the first steps on land, Akoum makes it clear that it doesn't like guests. Sulfurous clouds choke the air, glass spike fields dot the landscape, the earth is almost barren, and no major life-preserving rivers flow. It is a hellscape in which only the hardiest and well-adapted survive. Chitinous and plated insects burrow underground, tunneling under the lava flows. Dragons soar above the skies and roost atop the mountain peaks of the continent, and hardened beasts as well as the sentient races that populate Akoum navigate the dangerous terrain of one of the most hostile continents of Zendikar, made all the more so by the presence of the Royal. The Royal causes massive upwellings of noxious gases, destructive outbursts of volcanic activity, and tectonic instability that makes an already tough existence on Akoum practically impossible. Yet there are areas where civilization desperately grasps for a foothold. Humans are the most common population, but Khor and elves also exist here, as well as sizable communities of goblins. The small camp of Afa, at the base of the Akoum mountain range, was a hub for trade and commerce on the continent, and acted as a base camp for the Akoum Expeditionary House. A rare oasis of safety for adventurers to replenish their bags and their spirits before heading back out to explore the dangerous landscape. Above the town of Afa, nestled deep within the Akoum mountain range, exist several bands of human barbarians collectively known as the Kargan tribes. The Kargans are brutal and hardy, much like the land, and consider themselves masters of both the land and the sky of Akoum. Centuries ago, they mastered the art of bonding with the dragons of the continent, and have since created a mutualistic and communal relationship with the strong beasts. Their warlords ride the dragons to exhibit their martial prowess and right to rule the tribes, flying into battle to deliver both steel and fire. They raid the small communities of settlers as well as the goblin nations. The goblins live in the crags and cracks of Akoum, their havens protected by natural barriers. Goblins of Akoum are predominantly part of the Tuk-Tuk tribe, named after a notoriously curious and stupid goblin. The tribe follows the leadership of Zada, the Hedron Grinder, as they work tirelessly to preserve their bleak existence. The largest center of civilization in Akoum is not a city, but rather a great caravan of settlers and grangers that is constantly on the move. Goma Fada. The name literally means the city that walks, an apt title for such a massive caravan train of nomads. Life in Akoum is tough and the land is restless, and so the best chance for survival is for the people to be restless as well. At least that's the philosophy of Goma Fada and one of its leaders, Bruce Tarl, whose tenacity and obstinance are rivaled only by those of his oxen. The people of Goma Fada, their massive herd of pack beasts, and their livestock travel all across Akoum in search of hospitable places to camp. There are several notable locations on the continent. The first is the mountain range itself, called the Teeth of Akoum. For millennia, the three Eldrazi Titans remained trapped in stasis and buried underneath the Teeth of Akoum, sealed from the world by the Eye of Ugin. A deep valley within the mountain range is known as the Glass Pool. Here, a lake of crystal clear water sits motionless and undisturbed by the upheavals and dangerous activity of the continent. Just below the surface sits an extensive network of ancient Makindi structures called the Ior Ruin, which can be seen in all of its glory from above. No doubt the lingering magic of the ruin is what keeps the glass pool calm in such a volatile place. Perhaps the most intriguing location on Akoum is the densely vegetated Ora Ondar, also known as the Colony Garden. Life blooms are frequent occurrences on the continent that take place when nutrient-rich soils are brought to the surface by the tectonic activity of the roil, and plant life bursts free, quickly growing to suck up all the food it can before being destroyed by magma flows. The Colony Garden is a life bloom that has been magnificently and magically sustained for over 100 years, a lush tangle of vegetation that acts as an oasis in sharp contrast to the inhospitable nature of Akoum. Here, lotus cobras can be seen weaving through the vines, elves of the Sejiri clan nurture and protect the life within, and even hydras stalk the forest of the impossible garden. The life bloom's longevity is credited to the colony heart, an enormous and magically energized flower that is a bud or extension of the very soul of Zendikar. It sustains the continued life and growth of all around it, but something else could also be fueling the impossible garden, and we get a hint in the card Colony Gem. A shard of an ancient, possibly Makindi, mana refractor was lost in the heart of Ora Ondar. Regardless, the Colony Garden is an exceptional and rare sight in the otherwise noxious and brutal continent of Akoum. A network of underground rivers connects Akoum to its close neighbor, the continent of Bala Ged. Dense, humid jungles give way to fetid swamps and deadly marshes, which leaves much of Bala Ged largely undiscovered. The entire continent seems to be an illustration of the primordial wild Zendikar, before civilization ever attempted to tame it. The majority of Bala Ged is covered by a dense, humid jungle known as the Goom Wilds, or just the Wilds to the elvish inhabitants. Carnivorous and poisonous plants cover the ground, and light barely filters through a vegetation-choked canopy. It is within these wilds and tangled vales that two of the three elvish nations reside. The Joraga and the Moldaya clans of elves have called Bala Ged home for thousands of years. The Joraga are a deeply xenophobic and nomadic tribe of elves that resent the waves of even their fellow Sejiri and Moldaya. The Moldaya nation is secretive, following ancient traditions and mystical arts. They revere the spirits of the dead and maintain connection to those who have passed beyond. Their leaders often employ spirits for guidance, such as Obun, the ancient leader of the Moldaya. Bala Ged is also home to the sapient reptilian Surakar. Not much is known about them besides their strength and proclivity for residing in damp cavern networks. They are a vestige of the earliest days of Zendikar. Surprisingly, a clan of goblins calls this land home. They are the Grotag Goblins. Similar to other goblins in most respects, the Grotag believe themselves to be master riders and attempt to mount the native beasts, although largely unsuccessfully. Trappers and hunters from other continents come to Bala Ged for prizes, adventure, and commerce. Boats arriving in Bala Ged travel into Bajuka Bay, where they can then take the Umung River into the heart of the continent. The jungles and marshes of Bala Ged pale in comparison to the swamps, brackish waters, and parasitic mires of the continent of Guul Draz. The two landmasses are separated by a giant marshland, and the transition from lush jungle to infested swampland is quick. Guul Draz is as inhospitable as Akoum, where predators lurk beneath the water's surface. Large arrays of insects and parasites transmit deadly diseases, and even the land itself seems to suck the life out of the travelers and adventurers that brave it. Guul Draz is defined by its many festering swamps and noxious growth, which, like much of Zendikar, extend vertically as well as horizontally. In the Zoff marshes, large mangrove trees extend towards the sky, and in the hanging swamp, globules of vegetation and earth float suspended, with rancid vines extending out to form a dense network. The environment is perfectly suited for the predators and parasites that call Guul Draz home. Large monitor lizards and crocodiles wade through the oily black water, stalking prey before jumping out and snatching it with surprising speed. Mosquitoes, blowflies, and other parasites sting, bite, and slowly consume all who enter the swamps, and larger insects spin webs or lay traps to capture the unsuspecting. Even the land, in the form of tar elementals and noxious fumes, tries to claim the lives of prey and travelers. The largest region of Guul Draz is the Hagra Swamp, an enormous mire where rotting trees and festering roots occasionally extend out from the stagnant water. Many carnivorous plants and lilies extend large tendrils to wrap around prey and consume, and fungal organisms emit noxious spores. The decay and danger that surrounds all of Guul Draz is apparent in the Hagra. Those who don't succumb to the flora or disease are quickly gobbled up by the lizards and horrors that skitter through the mists. Beyond the swamp, the air clears a little and the stagnant waters give way to rushing streams and cascading waterfalls that barrel down limestone gullies and narrow canyons in an area called Palaka Karst. But the karst is no less dangerous. The current itself is swift enough to drown, and many of the caverns are in fact maws of the largest river predators in all of Zendikar, like the Palaka worm. Here, the landscape is in constant shift, thanks to the presence of the royal. There are settlements on this forsaken continent, and a few different races call Guul Draz home, the most notable being the vampires of Zendikar. Nowhere else on Zendikar do vampires live in such abundance or as openly as on the continent of Guul Draz, where the many families of blood chiefs reside behind the walls of Malakir, the Dark City. A place of debauchery, wanton excess, and disgusting decadence. The vampires built the city of Malakir in order to provide all the luxuries that coincide with a life of superiority. Vampires on Zendikar are grouped into different families that are led by a blood chief. Only a blood chief is capable of siring more vampires. Lesser members are only capable of siring mindless zombies known as gnolls. Like many others, Zendikar vampires feed on the blood and life essence of other beings, are essentially immortal, and have significantly increased physical abilities. This allowed the vampires to construct a city and society that was the largest on all of Zendikar at one point. Within the walled gates, Malakir is divided into districts based on the ruling blood chief. 5 major houses existed: Kalastria, Get, Nurkana, Emavera, and Urnav. Vampires believe themselves superior to other beings and often hunt, enslave, or otherwise terrorize the races that dare trespass into their home. Despite the vampires' dominance, humans, merfolk, and elves have established settlements here. The free city of Namana lies on the coast of Guul Draz and is a major port where slavers and traders exchange goods or services. The most vile individuals on Zendikar conduct dubious business and black market affairs in secret around Nemena, and the citizens take every liberty to appear as fearsome as possible to deter vampires from attacking them. A small band of merfolk live in the settlement of Lulia, where they busy themselves with commerce and ferrying of goods along the rivers of Guul Draz, and a group of Tajuru elves live within the Hagra Swamp, using its natural defenses as a means of protection against the vampires. Guul Draz has many ancient sites and treasured ruins that lay buried underneath the muck and overgrowth. The Hagra Cistern, where ancient and powerful merfolk magic still lingers, and the shade-infested Helix of Zoth are the most notable. The continent of Guul Draz is dangerous, where everything from the tiniest fly to the largest worm is trying to kill the unsuspecting, and where one misstep could end an entire party of adventurers. Apart from the supercontinent of Akoum, Bala Ged, and Guul Draz stands Murasa, a small island continent teeming with life and wild growth. Murasa is named the Walled Continent because of an extensive natural seawall of sheer cliffs that encloses the entire continent and makes travel into the interior extremely harrowing. As such, it is loosely populated by outsiders. The only large entrance into Murasa is controlled by a belligerent ogre named Kazul. A toll is required to use the road of Kazul and his cliffs. Any who cannot pay or refuse to are summarily hurled from the top of the cliffs down into the rocky coast below. There is one other entrance known as Sundered Bay, a break in the seawall where Tajuru elves and merfolk work together to help guide travelers across its deadly pathways. Once travelers navigate the formidable seawall, the stunning beauty of the continent unfolds before their eyes. It is a lush landscape of large jungles, meandering waterways, and rolling hills, where mountain ranges are covered in verdant growth and massive jati trees reach towards the floating cliffs and suspended hedrons. All across Murasa is a sense of irrepressible growth and vibrant life. The largest region of the continent is the extensive network of canyons, winding valleys, jagged plateaus, and jungle growth known as Kazandu. The region takes on an appearance of fractured collapse, and it's believed that a cataclysm lost to time destroyed much of the landscape, leading to the irregularities that are a common sight of the region. Here, jati trees form an extensive canopy network that reaches hundreds of feet into the sky. Each tree is massive, large enough to support entire villages of Tajuru Nation elves that call Murasa home, and it is a widely held belief that no jati tree has ever died. The elves are the dominant race on Murasa, and the Tajuru Nation has the largest population. Villages, outposts, and roadways are carved into the branches of Murasa's mighty trees, where thousands of elves can take up residence and never once have to touch the ground. Within and below the canopy, many jungle predators hunt prey with swift speed, and elementals enact the plane's will for growth. Enormous worms, baloths, terra stompers, and apes can be found here, fueled in size and strength by the abundance of rich mana in Murasa. On the plateaus outside the forest's reach, many herds of beasts graze on abundant grasslands. Bands of Kor and goblin tribes find homes in the canyons and trenches that zigzag across Kazandu. To the west, along the seawall, the Skyfang Mountains divide much of the continent in half, their jagged peaks covered in foliage. Flying Rocks, prides of Felidar, and some goblin tribes are most at home along the mountain peaks. To traverse the mountains, one must travel the precarious Shatterskull Pass, where floating rock fangs and unstable boulders frequently come crashing down on the unsuspecting after having been dislodged by the activity of the roil. Those careful enough to evade the rocks are still at the mercy of giants and raiding minotaur that live within the cliffs and caverns of the pass. The essence of Murasa is growth and size, large creatures, massive plants, and big landscape. This extends beyond the coastline into the surrounding sea, where stories trickle in of sailors witnessing leviathans of unimaginable size rising up from the benthic deep and swallowing entire fleets or changing the course of the tides. One such creature is the enormous octopus Lorthos, the Tidemaker, a leviathan of mythological proportions whose presence perhaps led to the formation of the Murasa sea wall. Like the other continents of Zendikar, Murasa is replete with ancient ruins, excavation sites, and treasure troves, the most significant being the Singing City. Located deep within the interior of the continent, the Singing City is a remnant of the Kor Makindi Empire that remains enchanted by their powerful magic. It is so named because a low, droning hum and melody fills the air of the ruins and comes to the ear of all who venture near it. The song is insidious, piercing into the mind of any that hear it, and its magic eventually drives them towards madness. Song-mad individuals lose all sense of self or temperament, striking out against others and causing self-inflicted wounds. Anything to make the music stop. The purpose of the Singing City and the other ruins of Murasa is unknown, but daring adventurers nevertheless trek into the continent's wild horizons. The continent of Ondu is situated a short distance from Akoum across a narrow sea. It constitutes one central landmass and 3 large islands to the south, all surrounded by the Salundi Sea. The continent proper is known for its sweeping verticality. Tall plateaus, sharp ravines, and winding canyons make up most of the topography of Ondu. It comes as no surprise then that the continent is home to the largest number of Kor on Zendikar. Kor are a humanoid and white-aligned race that is nomadic in nature. They are deeply tied to the land and the sky, and they bridge the connection between the two with their mastery of the hook and the rope. Their ability to easily scale sheer cliffs and wide gorges make the Kor adept in the verticality Ondu presents. Although the ancient Kor of the Makindi Empire were city builders, the Kor of today are nomads, traveling light and never staying in one place long. Even so, most Kor can be found in Ondu or on one of its 3 isles. Goblins are another race that is well suited for the mountains and cliffs of Ondu, and many clans can be found deep within the Makindi trenches or along the arid mesas surrounding the teetering peaks. Ondu is steeped in the history of the ancient Makindi Empire, and the trenches are named so because they stand where the old capital once did. A civil war tore the empire apart, and one of their massive skyclaves came crashing down into the city, rendering it dust and creating the trenches that exist today. Felidar, rocks, and other beasts can be seen roaming the trenches of Ondu. Above, on the grass-topped plateaus, herds of grazing animals can be seen following migratory routes. The continent is not without its vegetation, a dense, temperate forest known as the Turn Timber, where basilisks, giants, and baloths hunt their prey, and where small bands of Tajuru nation elves cultivate life and protect nature. Another forest, high atop the plateaus, hides a marshland that surrounds an ancient site known as the Prison of Omnath. The prison lies deep within the belly of the plain and is connected to the physical realm by the seemingly endless soul stair. It is here where Omnath, the manifestation of Zendikar's heart, burst out of its prison. Beyond the Salundi Sea lie Ondu's 3 islands, Agadim, Bayin, and War Isle. Agadim has many grass-covered vistas and canyons, such as the region of Kabira, where settlements work to expand their populations. Along the trading network of the Kabira Crossroads exists a conservatory where great minds and scholars seek to understand the most notable feature of Agadim, the Hedron Field. The Hedron Field is the largest conglomeration of hedrons across all of Zendikar, and although they lie dormant, their mere presence has led to gravitational anomalies and unpredictable consequences for magic. Beyond the Hedron Field, nestled within a mountain range, sits the Crypt of Agadim, an ancient burial site that is heavily trapped and haunted by the spirits of the fallen, but nonetheless holds untold treasures for those cunning enough to brave its eerie caverns. The island of Bayin is volcanically active, with steaming coastline and humid jungles. The most striking feature of Bayin is the Crown of Talib mountain range, named after the Kor's god of the earth, and its jeweled centerpiece, the active, violent volcano Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle. Finally, the small, secluded Isle of War is remote and shrouded in mystery. It is the Isle of Secrets and holds untold knowledge of the ancient Makindi Empire. It is the burial site of a collapsed skyclave with many core laboratories and libraries. The secrets of War Isle are guarded by Fadun heads, stone statues that drone out whispers and threats to trespassers. The island itself is bathed in an eerie blue light, and it is closely associated with the afterlife to many Zendikari. Sphinxes patrol the skies around the island, offering riddles to travelers, and merfolk course through the currents along the coastline. Far to the north lies the continent of Sejiri, a frigid landscape covered in permafrost. It is an inhospitable and largely unpopulated polar continent, but that doesn't mean it's entirely devoid of life. Rocks, griffins, sphinxes, and drakes fly in wide circles, surveying the landscape in search for food. On the ground, Felidar and packs of wolves hunt large herd beasts adapted to the snowy environment. Covered underneath dozens of feet of snow and ice lie the remains of ancient Makindi sites as well as a destroyed skyclave of the Empire. This has prompted many explorers to brave the elements and seek out the treasures that lie within. The only way into the continent by water is through the Midnight Pass, a dangerous waterway that is only navigable with assistance from a merfolk guide. The merfolk have a fairly large presence in the cold waters that run underneath the glaciers. It's believed that the old city of Benthedrix, an ancient homeland of the merfolk, lies in ruins somewhere around Sejiri. Many of the merfolk have been drawn to the continent in hopes of uncovering their past. The final continent of Zendikar is the large landmass of Tazeem. Meandering rivers and mist-cloaked lakes flow along the verdant plains and dense forests of the continent. Life flourishes along these bodies of water and beyond, where rock formations and hedrons alike float in lazy suspension above the ground. Tazeem is bisected by a large river known as the Umara that feeds into the inland sea of Halimar. Halimar is an artificially made sea that is surrounded by a massive bulwark and seawall 500 feet high. Many groups of merfolk reside in Halimar, as do dangerous leviathans, serpents, and other sea creatures. Entrance into Halimar, and by extension the continent, is directed towards Tazeem's largest settlement and perhaps the biggest city of Zendikar, Seagate. Seagate and its lighthouse are a beacon of culture and progress on Zendikar, where mages and scholars seek knowledge, where trappers and traders exchange precious wares, and where adventurers and treasure seekers refill their packs with rations. Seagate is the largest commercial hub in Zendikar, and it acts as a base for the many expeditionary houses that seek to explore the other continents. Those seeking the interior of Tazeem must embark from Seagate into the Halimar, which grants access to the Umara River and the rest of the continent. The topography of Tazeem is quite diverse. Calcite flats and dry deserts surround the coastline of Tazeem, where nomads eke out a meager existence. As one travels along the Umara, grassland soon gives way to densely vegetated forests, where flatland quickly turns into rolling hills, then steep inclines. The merfolk enclave of Coralhelm, a bastion of merfolk culture and society, resides on an island in the Great Umara, close to the largest waterfall in all of Zendikar. The river cascades over a sheer drop of 300 feet that creates a beautiful and awe-inspiring waterfall known as Magosi, the Water Veil. It's believed that a massive serpent lives within a cave behind the water veil's streaming current. Much of the interior of Tazeem is dominated by an extensive network of giant trees whose branches weave an erratic lattice of vegetation. The canopy is so dense that light rarely reaches the ground, but when it does, it causes things to burst with wild growth and reach massive proportions, giving the forest its name, Orenreef, the Vast Wood. Giant worms, spiders, and oversized hydras tear through the forest and stalk equally large prey. The Vast Wood is a dangerous place, where predators lurk in every shadow and appetite is never satisfied. Several small bands of the Tejuru Nation of Elves lives within the Vast Wood, often connecting with the land and acting as animists. Beyond the Vast Wood and high above its canopy lies Ameria, the Sky Ruin, a group of rocks and shattered ruins that hang in the sky above Tazeem. The Sky Ruin is a shattered skyclave of the ancient Makindi Empire that was for many centuries believed to be the residence of the god Ameria. Access to the skyclave was barred by the Archangel Iona, the shield of Ameria. Many angels of Zendikar can be seen flying across Tazeem in the Sky Ruin. The settlement of Hada is located in the northern highlands of Tazeem, where the Great Umara River first emerges. Here, dubious business is conducted, and cutthroats walk the streets. Life on Tazeem is perhaps the most varied on all of Zendikar. Almost every race is represented in some way on the continent, and the climates range from warm coastal flats to harsh deserts to dense forests and everything in between. It's the beacon of civilization on Zendikar and the heart of progress. With all of Zendikar's continents explored, I'd like to take a moment to discuss how things have changed with the emergence of the Eldrazi, the battle for Zendikar, and its subsequent rise. The three Eldrazi titans Ulamog, Kozilek, and Enrikrol were imprisoned underneath the teeth of Akoum for centuries. After the seal around the Eye of Ugin was disturbed, the Titans broke free from their shackles, and their broods once again swept across the land. From Akoum, the Eldrazi horde swept across the continents, converting lush, fertile lands into nothing more than crumbling dust, and consuming all that stood in their way. The continents of Sejiri and Bala Ged were utterly demolished by the Eldrazi, their creatures and landscapes obliterated. We see this unfold in the cards Culling Drone and Bane of Bala Ged. Although the other 5 continents were not completely taken out by the Eldrazi, they suffered heavy losses of life and land. Oran Reef and the Turntimber Forests were consumed by the relentless swarms. The great city of Seagate was lost, its lighthouse and wall destroyed. The city of Malakir fell to civil war as many vampires became enslaved to the Eldrazi. All across Zendikar, signs of the Eldrazi's devastation can be seen. But with the defeat of Ulamog and Kozilek at the hands of the Gatewatch and Nissa's activation of the Lithoform core, Zendikar is growing once more. New life is being created and new works are being undertaken as Zendikar rebuilds itself. We can see this in flavor text and art of cards like Tangled Florahedron, Seagate Restoration, and Vastwood Surge, among countless others. Zendikar is recovering from old wounds and becoming as beautiful, dangerous, and wonderful as it was before. The continents reclaiming the nature and essence that makes the plane truly extraordinary. Thanks for watching this video on the plane of Zendikar Explained. I hope you have enjoyed our expedition across the 7 continents of Zendikar. Leave a thumbs up if you liked the video and subscribe for weekly lore content. Stay tuned for next week's video in which we'll discuss the history of the plane. And now I want to hear from you. Let me know which continent or region is your favorite and best captures your imagination in the comments below, as well as suggestions for future videos. Links to the references used can be found in the description. Until next time, go forth and explore the lore.